There's something inside your joints right now. Something you can't see, can't feel, but without it, every single step would be agony. And starting around age 30, you begin losing about 1% of it every single year. By 60, nearly a third of it is gone. And that's when the pain starts. I'm going to tell you exactly what this invisible fluid is, why you're losing it, and what happens when it's gone. But more importantly, I'm going to show you that there's actually hope. Because once you understand what's really happening inside your joints, everything starts to make sense. And when it makes sense, you can actually do something about it. So let's start with a question. Have you ever wondered why your joints feel different in the morning than they do later in the day? Why that stiffness takes a while to wear off? Why your knees feel locked when you first stand up, but after you move around for a bit, they loosen up? It's not random. It's not just your age. It's because of this fluid. And what you're experiencing every morning is your body trying to compensate for the fact that you don't have enough of it anymore. Let me paint you a picture. Inside every single joint in your body, your knees, your hips, your shoulders, your fingers, there's a small space between the bones. It's not much. We're talking millimeters. But in that tiny space, there's a fluid, a thick, gel-like substance that acts like a cushion between those bones. When you're young, this fluid is abundant. It's thick. It's slippery. It does two incredibly important jobs. First, it cushions your bones so they don't grind against each other. And second, it lubricates the joint so everything moves smoothly. Think of it like the shock absorbers and oil in your car, all rolled into one. But here's what nobody tells you. Starting in your 30s, you begin losing this fluid. About 1% every year. Now, 1% doesn't sound like much, does it? But do the math. If you're 40, you've already lost about 10% of it. If you're 50, you're down 20%. And if you're 60 or older, you've lost nearly a third of this protective fluid. And here's the thing, you don't notice it right away. The loss is so gradual that most people don't realize anything's wrong until they hit their 50s or 60s. By then, they've lost so much of this fluid that their joints are basically running dry. And that's when the pain starts showing up. You know that grinding sensation you sometimes feel in your knees when you squat down? That's not normal. That's the sound of bones getting too close together because there's not enough fluid between them anymore. Or that stiffness in your fingers in the morning. That's your joints struggling to move without adequate lubrication. Now, I know what you're thinking. What is this fluid? What's it called? Well, doctors call it synovial fluid. But forget that term for a second. I'm going to call it what it really is, your joint jelly. Because that's basically what it is. A jelly-like substance that keeps your joints happy and pain-free. And just like jelly, it's mostly water. But it's not just water. It's got this special ingredient in it that makes it thick and protective. That ingredient is what scientists call hyaluronic acid. But again, forget the fancy name. Just think of it as the thickening agent in your joint jelly. It's what makes the fluid gel-like instead of watery. Here's why this matters so much. When you're young and your joint jelly is thick and abundant, your joint can handle anything. You can run, jump, climb stairs, kneel down, lift things, and your joints absorb all that impact without any problem. The fluid cushions everything. It's like having built-in shock absorbers. But as you lose that fluid year after year, those shock absorbers start wearing out. The cushioning gets thinner. The lubrication decreases. And slowly but surely, your bones start getting closer together. Not touching yet, but closer than they should be. And that's when your body starts sending you signals. Maybe it's a little stiffness in the morning. Maybe your knees feel a bit achy after you've been walking for a while. Maybe you notice that getting up from a chair takes more effort than it used to. These aren't signs of getting old. These are your joints telling you, hey, we're running low on fluid here. We need help. Now, most people ignore those early signals. They figure it's just age. It's normal. Everybody over 50 has some joint pain, right? So they push through it. And because the loss of this fluid is so gradual, they adapt without even realizing it. You start taking the elevator instead of the stairs. You avoid kneeling down because it hurts to get back up. You stop doing certain activities you used to love, gardening, playing with the grandkids, going for long walks. And you tell yourself it's fine. You're just getting older. But here's what's actually happening. Every time you avoid using a joint because it hurts, you're making the problem worse. because movement is what helps your body produce more of this fluid. When you stop moving, your body produces even less. It's a vicious cycle. Let me explain how this fluid actually works, because once you understand this, everything clicks into place. Inside your joint, there are cells that produce this synovial fluid, this joint jelly. These cells are constantly making fresh fluid and absorbing old fluid. It's a continuous cycle. When you're young, they're really good at it. They produce plenty of fluid, and your joints stay well lubricated. But as you age, these cells start slowing down. They don't produce as much fluid as they used to. And the fluid they do produce isn't as thick or as protective. Remember that special thickening ingredient I mentioned, the hyaluronic acid? As you age, your body produces less of it. So the fluid becomes more watery, less gel-like. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a sponge between two hard surfaces. When the sponge is thick and full of water, it provides great cushioning. But if you start squeezing water out of that sponge, it gets thinner and thinner. Eventually, it's almost flat, and there's barely any cushioning left. That's what's happening to the fluid in your joints. And here's where it gets really interesting. Scientists used to think this was just a natural part of aging. They thought, well, everybody loses this fluid as they get older. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just how the body works. But then they started asking questions. Why do some 70-year-olds have virtually no joint pain while others can barely walk? Why do some people lose this fluid faster than others? If it's just about age, shouldn't everybody be affected the same way? So they started studying people from different parts of the world, different lifestyles, different diets, different activity levels. And what they found was surprising. The rate at which you lose this fluid isn't just about age. It's about a lot of other factors too. People who stay active throughout their lives tend to keep more of this fluid. People who eat certain foods seem to lose it slower. And people who avoid certain things like chronic inflammation maintain healthier levels well into old age. This was a game changer, because if the loss of this fluid isn't just inevitable, if there are things that speed it up or slow it down, then maybe there are ways to protect it, or even restore it. Now, before I go further, I want to show you something that's going to give you hope. Because after I learned all this about how we're losing this protective fluid, I spent months researching whether there was anything that could actually help. Not just manage the symptoms, but actually address this root cause. And I found something that actually makes sense when you understand what the real problem is. There's a free presentation I put together that walks you through the research, real scientific studies, not just theories, showing how people are actually restoring this fluid in their joints. Not with glucosamine or fish oil or the usual stuff that doesn't work. Something different, something that targets this exact problem. I'm going to put a link to that presentation in the description below this video. And here's what I want you to do. After we finish talking about what's happening to your joints, I want you to click on that link and watch it. Because understanding the problem is step one. But knowing there's actually a solution, a real, scientifically backed solution, that's step two. And you need both. The link's right there in the description. We'll come back to it, but I want you to know it's there. Because what I'm about to tell you next might make you frustrated or even angry when you realize how long this has been happening to your joints without you knowing it. But I want you to remember, there is hope. There is something you can do about it. All right, so let's talk about what actually happens when this fluid is gone. Because this is where the real damage starts. Remember, when you have enough of this fluid, your bones are cushioned. They're not touching. There's this protective gel between them. But as that gel disappears, the space between your bones shrinks. And eventually, there's not enough cushioning anymore. That's when you start getting what doctors call bone-on-bone contact. Now, it's not literally bone grinding directly on bone. There's still cartilage there. But the cartilage alone isn't enough. It was never meant to handle all that pressure by itself. It needs the fluid to help distribute the load. So when the fluid's gone, all that pressure falls on the cartilage. And cartilage, tough as it is, starts breaking down under that constant stress. Little bits of it start to crack and fragment. And those fragments float around in your joint, causing irritation. Your body responds to that irritation the only way it knows how, with inflammation. Your immune system sends cells to the area to try to fix the problem. But when the problem is ongoing, When every single step or movement causes more stress because there's not enough fluid, the inflammation becomes chronic. And chronic inflammation? That's when the real pain starts. That's the throbbing, aching sensation that won't go away. That's why your joints feel hot or swollen. That's why the pain is worse some days than others, because inflammation fluctuates. But here's what makes this whole thing even worse. That inflammation, it actually speeds up the loss of your joint fluid. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. The inflammation damages those cells that produce the fluid, making them even less efficient. So you lose fluid faster, which causes more bone stress, which causes more inflammation, which causes more fluid loss. It's a downward spiral, and if you don't break that cycle, it just keeps getting worse. Let me give you a real-world example of what this looks like. Let's say you're 55 years old. You've been noticing some knee pain for a few months. Nothing terrible, just some stiffness in the morning and a little ache after you've been walking around. That's stage 1. Your joint fluid is getting low, but there's still some there. Your body's trying to compensate. The pain is your body's warning signal. Hey, we need more fluid here. But let's say you ignore it. You figure it's just age. You take some ibuprofen when it bothers you. And you keep going. A year goes by. Now, the pain is more frequent. It's not just in the morning anymore. It hurts when you go upstairs. It hurts when you've been on your feet for a while. You start avoiding certain activities. That's stage 2. The fluid is now critically low. Your cartilage is starting to break down. Inflammation is setting in. The damage is accelerating. Another year passes. Now the pain is constant. Your knee hurts even when you're sitting. You can barely squat down. Walking more than a few blocks is difficult. Your doctor takes an x-ray and says you have bone spurs and degenerative changes. That's stage 3. The lack of fluid has caused significant cartilage damage. Your body is trying to stabilize the joint by growing extra bone, those spurs, but that just makes things worse. The inflammation is chronic. And now you're looking at serious interventions, steroid injections, maybe even surgery. All because of that invisible fluid you started losing back in your 30s. Now, I'm telling you this not to scare you, but to help you understand why this matters so much. Because if you're in stage 1 right now, if you're just starting to notice some stiffness or occasional pain, you still have time. You can still protect that fluid. You can still break that cycle before it gets to stage 3. And even if you're further along, even if you're dealing with chronic pain, there's still hope. Because while you can't turn back the clock completely, you can work on restoring some of that lost fluid. You can reduce the inflammation. You can give your joints a fighting chance. Here's something else nobody tells you. The loss of this fluid doesn't happen at the same rate in all your joints. Some joints lose it faster than others. Usually, the joints that bear the most weight or get used the most are the first to go. For most people, it's the knees. Your knees bear several times your body weight with every step. That's a lot of stress. So the knees often run out of fluid first. For others, it's the hips, especially if you sit a lot. Prolonged sitting actually reduces the circulation to your hip joints, which means less nutrients getting to those fluid-producing cells. So office workers, truck drivers, people who spend a lot of time sitting, they often develop hip problems. And then there are the hands. If you've done a lot of manual work with your hands, typing, gripping tools, repetitive motions, your finger joints might lose fluid faster. That's why you see older people with swollen, painful knuckles. It's not just arthritis. It's literally a lack of that protective fluid. Now, you might be wondering, is there any way to test how much of this fluid you have left? Can a doctor measure it? Technically, yes. There are imaging techniques that can assess synovial fluid levels. But here's the problem. Most doctors don't bother. Because until recently, they thought there was nothing you could do about it anyway. So why test for something you can't treat? But that's changing, because researchers have discovered that you can do something about it. And that brings me back to that presentation I mentioned earlier. Look, I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose you or prescribe anything. But what I can do is show you the research. Show you what scientists have discovered about how to address this root cause of joint pain, and let you decide for yourself if it's worth looking into. The presentation is free. It's in the description below this video. It's about 20 minutes long, and it breaks down exactly how certain compounds can actually help your body restore this protective fluid. Not theory, Actual clinical studies showing real results in real people. I'm asking you to watch it because knowledge is power. Understanding what's happening in your joints is important, but knowing what you can actually do about it, that's everything. That's the difference between accepting a future of pain and limitation and taking control of your joint health. So please, after we finish here, click that link. Watch the presentation. It could genuinely change everything for you because you don't have to just accept this. You don't have to resign yourself to a life of pain and restricted movement. All right, let me get back to what's happening with your joint fluid, because there's another piece of this puzzle that's really important. You know how I said you start losing about 1% of this fluid every year after age 30? Well, that's the natural baseline. But there are things that can speed up that loss dramatically. Things that make you lose this fluid at double or triple the normal rate. Let's talk about those accelerators. Because if you're doing any of these things, you're literally draining your joint fluid faster than you need to. Accelerator number 1, chronic inflammation from your diet. When you eat a lot of processed foods, sugar, refined carbs, and unhealthy fats, you create inflammation throughout your entire body. And that inflammation affects those fluid-producing cells in your joints. It slows them down, makes them less efficient, so you lose fluid faster. I've seen people in their 40s with joint fluid levels you'd expect in someone 20 years older, simply because of their diet. Their bodies are in a constant state of inflammation, and their joints are paying the price. Accelerator number 2, being sedentary. Remember how I said movement helps your body produce this fluid? Well, the opposite is also true. When you don't move, production slows down. People who sit for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, their joints are basically going dormant. The fluid-producing cells aren't getting the signals they need to keep working. It's ironic, right? Your joints hurt, so you move less. But moving less makes your joints produce less fluid, which makes them hurt more. You've got to break that cycle. Accelerator number 3, dehydration. Remember, this joint jelly is mostly water. If you're chronically dehydrated, and most people over 50 are, your body can't produce enough of it. Simple as that. You're literally giving your joints less raw material to work with. Accelerator number 4, chronic stress. This one surprises people, but stress hormones like cortisol actually interfere with your body's ability to produce this fluid. High stress equals less joint protection. It's another one of those invisible factors that adds up over time. And accelerator number 5, certain medications. Some common drugs, especially NSAIDs like ibuprofen and naproxen, can actually reduce synovial fluid production when used long-term. The irony is painful. You take them for joint pain, but over time, they might be making the underlying problem worse. Now, I'm not saying you should stop taking prescribed medications. Always talk to your doctor about that. But it's something to be aware of. So if you're dealing with joint pain right now, ask yourself, how many of these accelerators apply to you? Are you making the problem worse without realizing it? Because here's the good news. If you're speeding up the loss of this fluid, that means you can also slow it down. You can protect what you have left. And in some cases, you can even help your body restore some of what's been lost. Let me tell you about the signs that you're losing this fluid faster than normal. Because catching it early makes all the difference. Sign number 1, morning stiffness that lasts more than 30 minutes. A little stiffness when you first wake up is normal. But if it takes you half an hour or more before you can move normally, that's a red flag. Your joints have been immobile all night, and there's not enough fluid to quickly relubricate them. Sign number 2, your joints feel better after you've been moving around. This might seem obvious, but it's actually a very specific indicator. Movement stimulates fluid production. So if you feel worse when you've been still and better after activity, your joints are struggling to maintain adequate fluid levels. Sign number 3, you hear clicking or popping sounds in your joints. When there's enough fluid, your joints move silently. But when the fluid gets low, you start hearing sounds. It's the components of the joint moving without adequate lubrication. Sign number 4, you have pain that gets worse as the day goes on. If you wake up feeling okay, but by evening your joints are killing you, that's classic fluid depletion. You start the day with some fluid, but the demands of daily activity use it up faster than your body can replenish it. Sign number 5, the pain moves around. One day your knee hurts, the next day your hip, then your shoulder. This suggests systemic fluid loss. It's not just one joint, it's all of them running low. And sign number 6, you feel like your joints are dry. I know that sounds weird, but many people describe it this way. It's like your joints feel rough or gritty instead of smooth. That's exactly what's happening. Without enough fluid, the surfaces aren't gliding smoothly anymore. If you're experiencing even a few of these signs, your joint fluid is in trouble. And the sooner you address it, the better your outcome will be. Now, let's talk about what happens if you don't address it. Because I want you to understand what you're preventing by taking action now. When joint fluid continues to decrease year after year, you eventually hit a point of no return. The cartilage breaks down so much that even if you could restore the fluid, the damage is already done. You're looking at joint replacement surgery, artificial knees, artificial hips. And here's what the medical system won't tell you. Those surgeries are not as successful as they make them sound. Sure, some people do great, but many others deal with chronic pain even after replacement. Limited range of motion. The need for revision surgeries down the line. I'm not saying joint replacement is never necessary. Sometimes it is. But wouldn't you rather avoid it if possible? Wouldn't you rather keep your natural joints functioning as long as you can? That's what protecting and restoring your joint fluid can do. It can help you keep your natural joints. It can help you stay mobile and active well into your 70s, 80s, even 90s. It can help you avoid becoming one of those statistics. One of the millions of people who can't play with their grandkids, can't travel, can't do the things they love because their joints won't let them. And that brings me back to hope. Because despite everything I've just told you about how you're losing this fluid and what happens when it's gone, there is hope. Real, tangible hope. Scientists have figured out how to help the body restore this fluid. Not with surgery, not with dangerous drugs, with a natural approach that actually makes sense when you understand what the problem is. See, the old approach to joint pain was to target the cartilage. That's what glucosamine and chondroitin are supposed to do, help rebuild cartilage. But there was a massive study, over $12 million, that proved they don't actually work. They don't rebuild cartilage, and they don't reduce pain any better than placebo. Why? Because they were targeting the wrong thing. The cartilage isn't the main problem. The fluid is. But what if you could give your body what it needs to produce more of that fluid? What if you could help those fluid-producing cells work better? What if you could restore the thickness and protective quality of the fluid that's still there? That's exactly what this new approach does. And it's backed by real research. Studies showing measurable improvements in joint fluid. Studies showing reduced pain. Studies showing improved mobility. I'm not going to go into all the details here because, honestly, the presentation I made explains it way better than I can in a video like this. It walks you through the science step by step, shows you the studies, explains exactly how it works, and most importantly, shows you how you can access this solution. So here's what I need you to do. Right now, while you're thinking about this, go to the description below this video. Click on the link to the free presentation. Set aside 20 minutes to watch it all the way through. Don't put it off. Don't say, I'll do it later, because we both know later turns into never. Your joints are losing fluid right now. Every day that passes, you're losing a little bit more. Every week you wait is another week of potential damage. But if you take action now, if you watch that presentation and learn about this solution, you could stop that downward spiral. You could start protecting the fluid you have left. You could even restore some of what's been lost. I've heard from hundreds of people who watched that presentation and decided to try this approach. In the stories they share, people in their 60s and 70s getting their mobility back, reducing or eliminating their pain, doing activities they thought they'd never do again. Those stories give me goosebumps. Could it work for you? I can't promise anything. Everyone's different. But I can tell you this, you'll never know unless you try. And you can't try until you understand what this solution actually is. So click that link. Watch the presentation. Give yourself that chance. Because you deserve to live without constant joint pain. You deserve to move freely. You deserve to do the things you love without your body holding you back. The link is right there in the description. Click it now. Don't wait. All right, let me give you a few more pieces of information that I think are really important. First, let's talk about the difference between dry joints and healthy joints. Because when you understand this viscerally, you really get why this fluid matters so much. Imagine two door hinges. One is well-oiled. When you swing that door, it moves smoothly, silently, effortlessly. You could open and close that door 1,000 times, and it would work perfectly every time. Now imagine a door hinge that's dry. When you swing that door, it creaks. It resists. You have to push harder to get it to move. And if you keep using that dry hinge over and over, eventually it's going to wear out. The metal is going to grind against metal. It's going to get damaged. That's exactly what's happening in your joints. When they're well lubricated with that protective fluid, movement is smooth and pain-free. But when they're running dry, every movement causes friction. Every step, every bend, every reach is wearing down the components of your joint. And just like you can oil a door hinge and get it working smoothly again, you can restore fluid to your joints and get them moving better. The door hinge doesn't stay broken forever if you give it what it needs. And neither do your joints. Second point, and this is important, you can't see this fluid disappearing. There's no warning light that goes off when you hit critical levels. By the time you feel pain, you've already lost a significant amount. That's why being proactive is so crucial. Think about it like this. When your car is running low on oil, there's a light on your dashboard that tells you. You have time to add more oil before the engine gets damaged. But with your joint fluid, there's no dashboard. There's no light. You only find out there's a problem when damage has already started. That's why those early signs I mentioned, the morning stiffness, the sounds, the pain that improves with movement, those are your warning lights. If you're experiencing any of them, your fluid is already getting low. Don't wait for the pain to get worse before you take action. Third point, your joints are incredibly resilient if you give them what they need. I've seen people who thought they were headed for surgery completely turn things around by addressing this fluid issue. Joints that were painful and stiff becoming mobile and comfortable again. Your body wants to heal. It wants to work properly, but it can't do that if it doesn't have the raw materials it needs. And when it comes to your joints, the most important raw material is that protective fluid. Now, I want to address something that might be going through your mind. You might be thinking, okay, this all makes sense, but why haven't I heard about this before? Why didn't my doctor tell me? Great question. And the honest answer is the medical system is slow to change. For decades, doctors were taught that joint pain was just wear and tear, just age, just something you had to live with. So they didn't look for solutions because they didn't think there were any. But the research on synovial fluid and joint health is relatively new. The studies showing you can actually restore this fluid are even newer. And it takes time for that information to filter through the medical system and change how doctors practice. Plus, let's be honest, there's not a lot of money in prevention. The medical system makes money from surgeries, injections, procedures. If you can solve your joint pain by restoring your joint fluid naturally, there's no surgery, no expensive treatments, no ongoing procedures. I'm not saying there's some conspiracy. I'm just saying the incentives aren't always aligned with helping you prevent problems. They're more aligned with treating problems after they've gotten bad enough to require intervention. That's why you have to take your health into your own hands. You have to educate yourself. You have to be proactive. And that starts with understanding what's really going on with your joints, which you now do. Let me give you one more analogy that I think really drives this home. Think of your joints like a water well. When you're young, the well is deep and full. You could draw water out of it all day long, and it just keeps refilling. That's your joints when they're producing plenty of fluid. But as you age, the water table drops. The well gets shallower. You can still draw water, but there's less of it. And if you keep drawing at the same rate without doing anything to replenish the well, eventually you hit the bottom. That's where a lot of people are right now. They've been drawing on their joint fluid for decades without replenishing it. And now the well is almost dry. But here's the good news. Wells can be recharged. If you give them what they need, they can fill back up. Not all the way to where they were when you were 20, but enough to make a real difference. Enough to take you from pain and limitation back to comfort and mobility. That's what this new approach to joint health is all about. Recharging the well. Giving your body what it needs to produce more of that protective fluid. And before you ask, no, Drinking more water isn't enough. Yes, hydration helps, but the specific component that makes this fluid thick and protective, that hyaluronic acid I mentioned earlier, your body needs more than just water to produce that. It needs specific building blocks that most people aren't getting. That's where this solution comes in. And that's why I keep coming back to that presentation, because it explains exactly what your body needs and how to give it those building blocks in a way that actually works. Look, I know I'm being persistent about this, but I'm being persistent because I've seen too many people suffer needlessly. I've seen too many people deteriorate to the point where they need surgery, when if they had just known about this sooner, they could have prevented it. I don't want that to be you. I don't want you to look back 5 years from now and think, I wish I had done something when I first started feeling that pain. I want you to look back and think, thank God I took action when I did. So one more time, the link to the free presentation is in the description. It's right there. Click on it. Watch it. Learn about this solution. And then decide for yourself if it's something you want to try. You've got nothing to lose by watching a free presentation, but you've got everything to lose by ignoring the problem and hoping it just goes away. Because it won't. That fluid you're losing, it's not coming back on its own. The pain you're feeling, it's only going to get worse unless you address the root cause. But if you take action, if you learn about this solution and give it a try, you could be one of those success stories. You could be the person telling your friends and family, I can't believe how much better I feel. I can do things now I couldn't do 6 months ago. That could be you, but only if you take that first step, only if you click that link and watch that presentation. All right, let me wrap this up because I've given you a lot of information and I want to make sure the key points are crystal clear. Your joints have an invisible protective fluid that keeps them moving smoothly and pain-free. Starting around age 30, you lose about 1% of that fluid every year. By the time you're in your 50s and 60s, you've lost enough that your joints start to hurt. That pain isn't just age. It's a specific, identifiable problem with a specific solution. The loss of this fluid causes your bones to get too close together. That puts stress on your cartilage, causes inflammation, and creates that chronic pain you're feeling. If left unchecked, it leads to serious joint damage and potentially surgery. But you don't have to accept that fate, because scientists have discovered how to help your body restore this protective fluid. Not with glucosamine or the old approaches that don't work. With something different, something that actually addresses the root cause. I've made a free presentation that explains all of this in detail and shows you exactly what this solution is. It's in the description below. Please, for your own sake, watch it. Give yourself a chance to feel better. Give yourself a chance to keep your natural joints healthy and functional for years to come. Before I go, quick favor. If this video helped you understand what's really happening with your joints, hit that subscribe button. I make these videos to share information that can actually help people, and subscribing lets me know you want more of this kind of content. And leave a comment. Let me know what you're dealing with. Knee pain? Hip pain? Hands? Back? I read every comment, and your feedback helps me know what topics to cover next. Remember, I'm not a doctor, and this isn't medical advice. What I'm sharing is based on research, but your situation is unique. Always consult with your physician before trying anything new, especially if you have existing health conditions or take medications. But also remember this, you don't have to just accept joint pain as your reality. You don't have to resign yourself to a future of limitation and discomfort. There is hope. There is a solution. You just have to be willing to learn about it and try it. That presentation link is waiting for you in the description. Click it. Watch it. Take control of your joint health. Your future self will thank you.